All right, welcome back to another episode of Rewiring Health. Very excited to be joined by Melissa Mejia. So thank you so much for being here today.
Hello, hello, beautiful Kelly. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is going to be such a topic that will resonate with so many people. And like I was saying, I was talking to you, like there's so many things that you talk about that I'm like, yes, like we need to showcase this more because women need to just love themselves for who they are and embrace that and
Yes.
embrace their inner power. So if you're listening to this right now and you're struggling with accepting yourself, maybe your body image or whatever it is, or you just feel like you're showing the world one version while you feel another, you definitely want to stick around for this episode. So I want to start out because I always love to hear people's journeys of like, how did you get to this point? So do you mind sharing your journey of like where you came from and what brought you to the point where you're helping women in this platform?
Oh my gosh, yes. I could write a full book about it, actually. I'm
Yeah.
actually in the works of it. So thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited. I'm elated to have this conversation. I feel it's going to be
Yeah.
very intuitive and it's going to support so many of your audience and the world. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So I am Melissa, just like Kelly said. And I am the one. Oh gosh, sorry, there's thunder. If you
Oh,
hear
that's
thunder,
okay.
it's
No
because it's
worries.
thundering.
Just had it here.
Okay, perfect. But I am the one activator. So I have been in a journey where I came from being powerless, where my power was stripped away from me when I was really young. I went through so much hardships when I was young. Um, for to like give you a little bit of a glimpse, I went through foster care. I was in foster care for 4 to 5 years. I feel like it was. I can't really remember at this moment. I also came to a new country, right? And I actually became a foster child during the time that I was in a new country where I had no language yet. It was everything was new. I didn't have any family. My only family was my mom at that time. I also grew up in a household where there was alcohol, right? So I had an alcoholic parent as well. There was also emotional abuse. I also was sexually abused. Like there was a lot of different things that I went through many years in my childhood, and they actually have shaped me to who I am now, right? But they also do not define who I am, which is something so important that I want to say out loud, and I want to remind, right, that what we go through doesn't mean it defines us, right? Like it is a part of us, it is a part of our story, a part of our chapter, but it's not who we are, right? Like it doesn't define who we are today and this very day. So what I noticed as my life went on, I noticed how much I actually was being stuck in the energy of, negatively looking at what my life had been, right? Living through foster care, the experiences that I had endured. And because of that, I actually negatively put myself down. So I actually began to have a very restrictive journey with my body and with food, especially, and fitness, because that was one of the only ways that I was able to actually control at that time, like what was going on. So I did it through food, right? And I did it through the way I spoke to myself. Now, this was throughout the years of like my teenhood, right? I never felt like I belonged where I lived, right? Living in the United States, where I'm actually Colombian. So I didn't belong in Colombia because I didn't look Colombian, and I didn't belong in America because I didn't look in America. I didn't look American. So then there was like this identity crisis that I had. So I thought that if I actually controlled myself, the way I ate and the way that I viewed my body, so others can view me and can like me, and I can please others, and I can control all of this, right? All of these like different things, then I'm able to be loved, and then I'm able to be liked, and I'm gonna have all these friends and people, all of these people are gonna love me, etc., etc. And come to find out that the opposite occurred, right? I was in a very restrictive relationship and I had a lot of eating disorder tendencies. My relationship with my body was non-existent, and it was rather very spiteful and very hateful, right? I have a lot of experiences through it all. So I decided one day, and I think I was in my it was after my 18th birthday. I was like, I think it was 18, from 18 to 20, I started to notice that I wanted something different, that I wanted to feel strong, that I didn't want to, everything that I went on through my childhood to keep coming with me in my life, that I knew that this was something I was going to speak about one day, that I knew I was hoping to inspire one day, but I no longer wanted to define me. And what I saw with everything, that my restriction with food, my restriction with my body, looking at my body the way I was looking at it, I was actually carrying all the weight that I had endured throughout all of my childhood, right? Like this was very heavy for me. So I decided to begin my healing journey. And this was a choice that I made. It was a very conscious choice, even though that I had gone through therapy for so many years after everything that occurred to me when I was a child. It didn't happen until after I actually finished therapy that I actually became very conscious. And I was like, I want this to be different. I want to tell a different story. And that's where the healing began. And slowly and slowly, I actually began to see what an unwavering love for my body felt like. I began to feel what being devoted to me was. I began to see what choosing myself possibly could mean for me, and what it actually brought into the light, into my world, into the light, right? And I no longer was just walking with the shadows, but I also was like my truest self. And this is where there are so many identities that I have lived throughout, but now in my 29 years of life, now I feel like I have really came to the calling of me and what I'm here to do, which is to talk about each and every single being the one, where they're choosing themselves unapologetically, where they can ravish in all of their oneness. And this feels really good because I came from a place that I was powerless, that my power was stripped away, where I was restricted in so many different ways. And then I restricted myself and I held myself back for so long. And I had so many masks and I pleased so many others instead of loving myself, instead of having this. So I want to give back to the world and to show them what's possible when we actually revel in our love, what's possible when we revel and are living in our rapture. Like, what does it feel like, who we are? So this is a little bit about my journey.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And thank you so much for sharing your story, because it's so empowering, and people have gone through some really tough things. So to have the bravery to share that and now use it as your power is just tremendous. And there's so many things
Thank
you
you.
said there. The big one I love is the identity. And that's everything, because we can, excuse me, change everything outside ourselves. But if we still identify as a victim, or we still identify as a powerless person, we're going to go back to that. So we can have the willpower to change things short term, but we always gravitate to what we identify as. And that's everything. And for anyone listening, and kind of look at, like, how do you identify yourself? Those I am statements are so powerful. So start paying attention to them. And you said it, it's like you once you change your identity, you change your life. And that's everything. And another thing you said that really resonated with me, and I can totally understand this because I dealt with the same thing, is how we try to change everything external to us when we lack control in our life. And we think that these external changes will make us feel whole inside, and they just never do. And it really takes that inner journey before we can actually feel like we're fulfilled. So yes, I can completely relate to that. It's
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, and what you just made me think of is like how empty, right? Like I felt for so many years. So I chased and I chased and I
yeah.
chased and I looked and I looked and I looked and I did diets, endless diets. I did so many. I looked for different programs in nutrition and fitness. I actually was a personal trainer myself for a decade, right? And throughout this time, I actually really began to notice, like, wow, there's so many of us that actually feel this way, where we're restricted, where we put on masks, where we're actually not being our truest selves, where we're not actually living in our oneness. And back then I didn't know this was what it was, but now that I'm here, I can see it in hindsight of what it is now, right? So for me, it's like I came to like, it was like a whole homecoming to me and like my sovereign being, and like, okay, this is who I am, and this is also what I get to do in the world, and this is my passion, and I live it, and I live it, I eat it, I sleep it, like
Mhm.
I the whole nines, the whole nines. So I'm very elated because I know what it is like, right? Like you know what's on the other side, and you just know that if when we make that conscious choice that's very intentional and very certain that this is what we're going to do, then you just don't look back. You just don't look back.
Yeah, yeah, it's like it almost hits differently. Like there's that different
Yes.
feeling where it's like, oh my gosh, I went through all that struggle not because it was in vain, but is because it was my foundation of creating something bigger in my life and serving people who are going through the same thing. So it's like, yeah, it's amazing. Like it's a testament to your healing when you can start taking those really, really tough places in your life and use them as gifts for what they are. And that's just, I mean, that's the biggest foundation to anything, because now you can relate to people who are going through that in a way that someone who hasn't gone through those struggles could never relate to them. And it's such a gift. It's amazing.
Yes. Yes, I so agree with that. Especially on the part where I actually very interestingly enough today, I was talking about tattoos. So I still don't have any tattoos yet.
Yeah.
But there's a couple that I've had in my mind.
Mhm.
And one that really resonated with me is no longer the I am,
Mhm.
but the be. Like be
Mhm.
myself, be yourself. And you can add whatever you want to the word after. But
Mhm.
it's like be me,
Yeah.
like and of course it's like be the one, of course, but it's just like be, because when I became just fully on in the being, like a fully embodied being of me and my humanness, I began to see who I really was, and I began to embrace myself as I was. And then of course the choices that I made for myself also went with that, right? Because now I held different standards for myself and values, not one of those where you're controlling everything, or you're needing like any validation or expectations, but more on the sense of like, I am choosing myself and this is what I want for me, right? And, speaking out about it and being certain in what you want, and feeling that for yourself and being like, I am so worthy of this. I
Yeah.
am so worthy and deserving of this, right?
100%.
And of course, it took me a while to get to that part and to that place, but here we are.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And it just comes to the saying is you get more of what you get more of what you accept in life. And it's like if you're willing to accept these lower things for your life, you're going to attract more of that in your life. And it's like for me, that was such a big statement because I'm like, holy, I am accepting these lower things. And it's like what you're saying too. It's like when you accept these and you don't expect your standards to be even higher and that you are worthy of more. That's the biggest thing, is the worthiness, because
Yes,
you always lower to your level of worthiness. You don't rise to what you expect, and things that happen. It's all what you believe you deserve. And so that's beautiful. Do you mind talking about your journey of discovering your worthiness and cultivating that and how you started that process? Because I know so many people who are struggling and it's like, okay, it sounds good, but how do I believe that I'm worthy when I'm going through these things? So how did you go through that journey of creating that in your life?
okay, when I look back, right, taking a moment,
Yeah.
just closing my eyes and just looking back at where it was, I just felt like there was more for me. Like the beginning wasn't like, I know I'm worthy of this, because I didn't know. I didn't know back then that I was worthy and deserving of it. That was enough. Because I didn't feel like it for so many years of my life. Like I lived such a beautiful childhood until I was 7, and then I came to a new country, and it just completely changed my life. Now, of course, there was so much negativity that went with that, but also it's a part of my story. So I don't say that, oh, I regret, all of these things. I don't. But I also, wish, of course, it was different. I wish my childhood was different. But when I look back on it, like I knew there was more, and I just knew that there was more for me. And I knew that I was grateful and thankful because I had lived a beautiful childhood previously. So it's like I had it embedded in me, and I feel like all of us have that embedded within them. Like I actually have a child myself. So I am a parent and to a lovely, lovely, lovely 3-year-old.
Mhm.
But he inherently knows he's worthy. Like he just knows it. Like when we have conversations, he's like, yeah, of course, like me. But we are then conditioned, we are then shown that we are not in so many different instances and experiences that we go through. So I knew I had it within me, right? And I knew there was more for me. I just didn't know what it was. And I still, again, didn't feel worthy yet. I didn't feel enough yet. But I was like, I know there's more. And I know I want to say and I want to feel differently. How can let me feel differently, right? And let me take charge of my thoughts, of who I am, of choosing myself. Like this is my time now, like it's my time now, right? And that's really when it became pivotal for me, because then I started doing different workouts that really made me feel really strong, and I actually began to do things for me, and I began to choose things for me that were very different than, for example, what others were doing. And from that part on, I actually began to see that there was a leader in me. There was someone that people wanted to watch. There was someone that people want to listen to, that they feel inspired by. And it really was through my actions that I saw, okay, I deserve more than that. Okay, I am worthy of that, right? So it was like my own actions that I created that. But in the beginning, I didn't feel it. It wasn't like that, but I took action. So this is where I tell you, and I tell your listeners to have the courage, have the audacity. If you feel that in your heart, because your heart calls, right? Your soul calls and it tells you, like, hey, hey, I want to do this differently, or I want to feel differently, or I want it to be different for you. And I know it's there. I know it's there. So it's like it's a calling, right? And um by that time I was like kind of dabbling into intuition, kind of dabbling into like what it is, what the universe was all about, etc., right? The spiritual realm. And I began to see like, okay, there is so much more for me. How does that look like? So then I began to create the actions, and from the actions, I began to create the evidence that yes, this is who I am. And of course, during that time, I had many, many lessons, right? Where, maybe I didn't choose the right person for me to be with, where I didn't choose the right friends, where XYZ. But then I began to see, okay, yeah, that doesn't feel good. That's not good. Okay, different standards, different values, different things, etc., etc., etc. The more that I did that, the more that I began to notice all of these pieces for me, like what my worthiness was, what was my deservedness, all of that. So it just kind of went through that way, but it's always through courage, right? And through audacious like fire within you to feel that you want it to be different, because there's a calling. It's a calling within.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That. And there's so many themes of what you said. And the big thing that stood out to me is just having that curiosity and just listening to that voice, like, is there more? And then having the curiosity to explore that. And you said courage. And I love that too, because I think sometimes we get held up on like, oh, I need to be confident. No, you need to be
Yes.
courageous. You don't have to be
Yes.
confident. Confidence comes with leaning into that courage, and courage comes with leaning into the uncomfortable. And that is the most beautiful thing when you start doing that. And what I love about your story is that you did take action. And even though some things weren't the right action, it would still give you information to move forward. And that's what I hope anyone who's listening to this takes that lesson forward, because you don't have to have this perfect journey where everything is great and it moves you forward. Like it's not going to be a linear journey. Like you're going to have things that you're like, oh, that was a dead end. Okay, let me
Yeah.
pivot. It's like if you're going through a forest, like you're not going to know how to get to the other side, but you just have to take a path and see if it leads you out. If it doesn't, you turn back and you go down another path. And I think we all get held up at like, oh, what if it's not a perfect journey? Okay, I won't even start. And that's the biggest
Yes.
thing you can do to give yourself a disservice. So I love what you said, and just having that curiosity, exploring it, taking action, learning from it, and believing that there's more for you in this world and universe. I love that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly believed it. Like I knew there's more. I have these desires, I have these wants, but I
Mhm.
don't feel like there for me. Like, right, like I have all the things that I want, et cetera, but I just didn't feel inherently like it was made for me. And I was like, but how can I do this? And this was actually even before I like touched upon manifestation, a law of attraction, all again spiritual things. But when I began to tap into it, I knew that there was just something more. And it was really through the courage that I held for myself where I knew there was something different. And it's a reminder for us too that we do have the choice. Like we have the choice to stay where we are. We have the choice to look back, or we have the choice to move forward, right? Like there is a choice, even though we say we don't have a choice, right? Like if there is no choice, there is. It just sometimes it's very uncomfortable to see what the choice is to move forward.
Yeah.
And when we move forward, many times it's actually in a very not even paved path, right? Like it hasn't even been paved. You've never been through it. So you're like, oh my goodness. And of course, the fears come up. Of course, so many things are going to rise up because it's uncomfortable. It's extremely uncomfortable, but it's on us to lean into that courage, to be vulnerable, to be open, to see, because there's a calling within you. And if you feel it, you go for it.
Absolutely. I love that. And just listening to that and honoring that, because I think so many of us feel that calling and then many like just kind of suppress it. It's like you just
Yes.
and you suppress it. And I think the biggest thing, I heard this too, and I love this statement, is like hell is getting to the end of your life and seeing the potential of what you could have been. And I'm
Oh
like,
my
oh
goodness.
my gosh, it's like that's it. You're not going to look back on your deathbed and be like, all those failures, because you're going to learn from something, but what you're going to look back is on what you didn't try. And so
Exactly.
I love that. It's just like you took the courage, you went for it, and you found this path, and you're evolving. It's like those things, you're always evolving, you're growing. That's what we're here to do, evolve and help others and serve others. And that's our whole process. So I love that you're on that path and on that journey and you discover that for yourself. Love
Oh,
that.
thank you so much. Yes, yes, yes.
I love to talk about, because I'm a big believer in like habits and what we do every day and like how that moves us in those directions. Do you mind talking about like what's a typical day for you, and what are some little things that you do every day that move your journey forward?
Oh, yes. This is such a juicy question.
Oh.
Oh my gosh. So one of the biggest things is like I'm very adaptable. If
Mhm.
there's one thing about me is that I'm a very adaptable human. I will always figure it out. I will always say, okay, maybe that was not the best path. Okay, how can we fix this? How can we change this? What worked? What didn't work? What can we always do better? Right? Like that's me. It's just been in my nature since I can remember. So I'm very adaptable. And now, for example, I am a mom. I also have a partner. I also have a full-time position. I work overnight on this full-time position. And I have my own business, right? And of course, also have my family. So there is a lot of moving pieces that go with this. And I choose myself through this whole time, right? So for me, it's very important to have habits like you were talking about that have been very beautifully created for me, right? So they will change. So for example, my habits began to change a little bit since I began working overnights because that began in May. And that's something totally new for me. But even previously, what I always, always, always have my focus on is movement. Like beyond anything, and like movement for me has always been where I feel the best for me and where I can actually release the energy that I'm moving through, any energy that I'm moving with, any energy that needs just movement. Movement for me has always been it, right? There's seasons and phases where I've just gone through yoga. There's seasons and phases where I've been to like pole dancing for a little bit. That was like 6 months of amazingness. And there's seasons and phases that I've done strength training. I always come back to strength training. That's me. But I've also done spin, I've done bar, I've done different things. But it's very me. It's very me. Like, if you know me, you know me that I'll be working out and I'll be moving my body. Like that's my number one thing. So that's like the big habit that I have that I love to speak on. This is also why I was a fitness instructor for over 10 years, right? Teaching others how to work out. Not only that, but to make it part of their life. And that for me was like, it's number one. So usually, for example, if I have my day off, I usually wake up really early in the morning before my son wakes up so I can go to the gym. I usually am there around an hour and a half because I do cardio. And then from there, I usually come home, I make my breakfast. I like having fresh food that I can have with my son, right? Time with him. It's very important. I always like to think of my days with intentionality. Now, for example, there are days that it's not going to occur, they're not going to happen. You kind of have to go with the flow of things. And sometimes you can just be like, you know what? Okay, you win. Like, okay, this is what it is. But usually in an ideal day, it's like I work out, I make my own breakfast, I have my time with my son, I drop him off because both his dad and I work, and then afterwards, I usually nap or something, and I tap into social media for a little bit, and then I go to sleep, I take a nap, and then I go to work. That usually is what happens. If I'm on my days off, usually I would do the same thing, right? But then it kind of moves with how, for example, how my son woke up, what time can I bring him so someone can watch him throughout the time that I'm working out, right? But I always make it possible for me. Is it easy? No. Is it intentional? Yes. Is it conscious? Yes. Is it wholeheartedly like who I am? Yes. So I will always make it work. So for me, movement is just so important. And this is like a path for me where I'm choosing myself, right? So choosing myself is buying incredible groceries for me. Like, yes, I am spending more money. I'm investing more money in me and my food, but of course it's because I want to feel good. Same thing with my fitness programs. Like I was a trainer for 10 years, but I do actually outsource who creates my programs. Why? I don't want to be doing that. I also want them to see me for my desires, for my wants, and I want you to give them to me. Thank you very much. Right? So I just want to show up for them. And that's usually what I do. Of course, I stay hydrated. That's another big focus. And I always stay present. Now, of course, life is going to get us, and there's going to be moments where you're going to be kicked out of your present moment, where you're going to be kicked out of that presence of where you are. But one thing that I always talk about is how presence is pleasure. And it's like you being here in the right now creates such delight and also allows you to be fully tuned in to like what's going on, how can you connect to yourself further and further and further so you can actually live the life that you're truly wanting and desiring. Like you actually start to notice like, ooh, okay, maybe that's not the best thing for me. How can I change it? How can I switch it? And how can I make it better for myself? And it's all about how we define each and every single habit for us that we can create it. I've had so many clients that are like, oh, I just don't have the time to work out, or et cetera, et cetera. How many times have we heard that? Countless times. And it's like, well, okay, let's see. So they tell me their schedule, and I was like, wait a minute, there's something right there. Oh, you chose to watch some TV like for 2-3 hours. Okay, how can we do that? And they're like, yeah, but that's my unwind time. And I was like, what if your unwind time was also you moving your body? And lo and behold, during the time that we worked together, it would always work. But I just hope and I just, I'm always like here seeing my clients, and many of them still do work out, and many of them still move their body, and many of them find their way. And so many times it's like with different trainers, or they're doing their own thing, but it's still doing their own thing. They're still choosing themselves, and this is the important piece.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. And big theme I heard from all that is the flexibility and recognizing.
Yes.
I love how you talk about the seasons, because that is so true. We have seasons of life and we're going to adapt, and we have to adapt to those. So there's going to be times where you're going to do different things. And I love that because that's realistic, and also just not expecting perfection. Like life happens, and that's okay as long as you get back on it the next day. And so there's so many things I'm pulling out from there. One thing I also like what you said is just talking about like, especially your story, like you have a lot of things going on. You're doing full-time job, your business, your son, like you have like you're wearing many hats, and it's like, so
Yes.
you're not like just sitting at home saying, yeah, y'all have time, like, it's like you're busy and you're creating this time. And I think that's the thing, because I
Yes,
think so many people resort to like, I need to find the time, but like, no, sometimes you need to create it. And that's the hard part. It
yes.
takes effort in creating that time. And it's like, if you were to schedule somebody, you would probably show up for that person. But why aren't we scheduling with ourselves? And that's the big thing. You
Exactly.
have to
That
schedule.
is so important. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for saying that, because I actually do have a calendar myself and I actually
Yeah.
schedule my workout times all the time. And if
Yeah.
I have to move it, again, a part of me, it's flexibility. Like I've let go of my controlling nature
Yeah.
of like wanting to control it. It's because of how much I didn't have control for so long. And I know that now. But now it's like, you know what? Like, yes, okay, this is it. Like, this is what we're gonna do. We gotta change it. We gotta switch it. Okay, let's do this. Let's go with the flow. It's a little bit more flowy. And this is why I also touched upon the presence.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And that's so key. And one other thing you said too is like, when people say, I don't have time, the big thing, I mean, I know I've heard that from many people too, I've worked with. The big thing we have to ask ourselves is like, when we have these statements, is like, are we cutting ourselves off at that statement? Because if you say, I don't have time,
Mm,
your brain says, yep, you don't have time. And it shuts down from any possibility of doing,
yes,
rather than it's a subtle difference, but it's all the difference. So you say, how can I find time to do this? And now your brain
yes, so
will
correct.
literally start finding those little things. Like if it's 10 minutes, great, do 10 minutes. You don't have to do an hour. 10 minutes is awesome,
Yes, I
Like
love how you tapped
find
into
that.
that. I love how you tap into that, because even previously, when I was actually in my lowest of lows, right? I also was very obsessed with working out. I would work out for 3 hours. Like sometimes my mom will call me. She's like, "Hey, are you like thinking of coming back home? Like, what's going on? Like, are you okay? Like, I want to make sure. Like, it's been a long time." And but my mom at that time, she didn't have a car, and I also didn't have a car, so I would walk to the gym and walk back. But I would always have to do extra things. Now you heard me saying I have an hour and a half. That's a privilege. That's a privilege that I have now, that I usually do that because I do my extra cardio in. But usually my workouts were 45 minutes. And actually, when my son was born, they were 30 minutes. Sometimes I didn't, I had like maybe 20 minutes. I had 15 minutes, right? It always depended, but I always created the time. He was napping. Okay, we're going to work out. Am I tired? A little bit, but can we do it? Yes, we can. And then I'll take a nap after. Like I would always figure it out. And I'm not saying do not listen to yourself either. This is about you listening to yourself, and where you can actually create that time and be like, okay, this is where presence is so important. So you can really schedule it in. And like you said, like, yes, you got to schedule time for you, right? Like I used to schedule journaling time for myself too, where it was so important, where I was really being tapped into my connection within me. Now I'm very intuitive because of where I am in my journey. But if the people that are listening are maybe starting off in their journey and really uncovering that, I would always say, like you just like you mentioned, schedule that time in, see how that feels, and see where you even feel like, oh yes, okay, I feel really good to journal in the morning, right? Or I feel really good to journal at night. It doesn't have to be everything all at once. How many of us think it needs to be like, oh yeah, I choose this. Okay, let's do it all together. No, it's like one step at a time.
Yeah, 100%. And that I find it to be such a big barrier in some people, and myself included. I was that person who was like, well, if I don't have an hour to work out, I'm not like, what's the point?
Yes,
It's a waste. I was so that person, because I was like an all or not, it's a process, but very much that person of like, I need to go all out on everything. Like otherwise it's not
exactly.
worth it. But it's so true. And it's like, if you're just starting out and you don't have self-care or anything built into your system, like start with 2 minutes a day, like literally just do 2 minutes a day.
Yes,
That is it. You don't
yes,
have to jump in. Like, I know you're saying an hour and a half, like I have a pretty rigorous routine, but you know what? It's taken me years to get to this point. When I started and I was in a rough place, like, yeah, it didn't look like this. So it's like, if you're listening to this, you're like, well, that seems so unobtainable. It probably is because you
exactly.
haven't given yourself the time and space to do that. But start with 1 minute. Let's find just 1 minute today. And that's all you need to be a foothold. So yeah.
I still agree with that. And actually, something that just came up for me too, it's like usually like the Apple Watches. I know not everyone has one, but a lot of people do wear these watches now, but many of them even have mindfulness and like a mindful
Yeah.
minute, right? So they usually pop up and it's like mindful minute, a mindful minute. So it's like very important for us to have that and to carry that. Can you give me
I just want you to talk, can you talk about the one? Because I know that's
Yes,
your
my thing.
yeah, your thing. So just
My
talk about,
thing.
yeah, I would love for you to talk about the one and just kind of dive into that.
Yes, actually, I'm actually wearing a one. I don't know if you can notice. I have a one
Oh,
necklace.
yeah, cool. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So the one came to be when I began to see others. And just throughout my lifetime, I had seen like, oh yeah, like you are working yourself for the one, right? Like you're working for the one person for you, right? Like having all these external ones in your life. And it hit me, and it was actually like it just like seeing it and seeing it and seeing it, and there was different identities that I have created throughout my lifetime, that have supported me through what I've been through and through what I've done also in the online space and with my business. There was a slave movement that I created for a couple of years, and this was like when my son was born. Then it was the and she is movement, which actually is what's called my podcast right now. And then it was Adorada. So it was like there's been very many different identities. But during this time, I actually was away on a vacation, sitting at the beach, watching the sunrise. And it just kind of hit me. And it just hit me how we're like, why are we doing this for others when we're not doing this for ourselves? And it just became something that truly like felt like a deep like sense of knowing. And not only that, but it just began pouring out of what I wanted to speak on and what I felt like it was more and more to talk about. And it became you being the once in a lifetime woman, right? And it became about you being the one. And I feel like each and every single one of us has that oneness where we are so irreplaceable, where we are so unique in who we are, where there's no one that can do it like us, no one that can speak like us, no one that can create like us, right? And it's like we are the ones, like we no longer are looking just for the ones outside of us, right? But we are actually the ones for us. And it's like something that just feels so delightful. And it's something that I am very lit up by. But not only that, but it feels like such a big purpose to really bring out this sacred rain for others, for them to also walk in, and for them to also be activated by, to be ravished by, to revel in, to feel in their home and who they are. And it comes like it's like an encompass of everything. It's the spiritual, it's the mind, it's the body, it's the soul, it's the energetics behind it. It truly is a total homecoming for those that are wanting to feel in their haven and what it feels like and what it is, and for them to be it now. Like it's you living in it at this moment right now, at this time, without waiting, without thinking that it needs to be for others or expectations or validations. It's like who you are right now.
Oh, I love that. That's everything. I mean, there's so many people probably struggle. I know I've struggled with that, where it's like, oh, and when this happens, then I'll feel whole, or when I have this in my life, I'll be whole, or like constantly making sure everyone else is taken care of, and then you're always on the back burner. It's like
Yeah.
so many things that so many people do and don't realize that it's creating this energy in them that's just suffocating, and it's like,
Yes.
yeah, so I love that. And I just love the concept of it, and that it encompasses all aspects of life, the spirituality, health, mental wellness, emotional. I love that. And it's so key to prioritize that in your life and recognize that you can be that one in your life and be your own
Yes.
hero, really, in your own journey.
Exactly, exactly. And like you are the main character, like you are the once in a lifetime. And it doesn't have to be woman, it could be person, it could be being. It's like whatever you wanted to name it, but it's like you are that once in a lifetime. And for you to see that and for you to like be a witness to it, it's like
Yeah.
your turn, like your turn. And it felt like it was so necessary, right? Because we are in a space, I feel like too, that the world is changing, where we're really focused on kind of self-development, where we're focused on more of ourselves, right? There's a lot more of the focus on a lot of health, but not only that, but like a lot of inner awakenings and spiritual journeys and et cetera, et cetera. And I still felt like there was, during that time, there's still, like, for example, what I went through, that there was still a lot of chasing for me. Like, okay, when this happens, this is where I'm going to feel healed, or when this happens is where I'm going to feel whole, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, really, no, it's like who you are right now, it's whole. You're whole right now, right? And also you can walk with like your highest self, so you can be more, right? And a lot of people can call it their magnetic selves. A lot of people can call it their quantum self. I like to call it their highest selves, right? But it's like you walking with who you are, but it's like, this is like a deep knowing that you are the one now, reawakening that for her and for you, and for you to even align deeper with your highest self so you can achieve what you are desiring.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Beautiful. It's everything. I mean, really, that's, I think really our kind of soul's journey in life is to continually evolve and to continually come home to ourselves. So yeah,
Yes.
I love that. For someone who wanted to work with you, connect with you, learn more about what you do, how can they do that?
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, okay, okay. All right. So you can find me on social media. I love it so much. I'm usually always plugged in, but you can find me on Instagram at Melissa Mejia Official. You can find me on TikTok as well. I'm kind of dabbling into that, seeing how that goes over there. You can also find me at andsheisofficial.com, and that's like where the space where you will find all my courses, all of like, especially like free experiences that I've created and everything. But my main kind of space is usually Instagram, usually TikTok, and actually Facebook. So you can find me by my name as well, Melissa Mejia. And from there, actually have a private Facebook group that I love to share, which is called The Sacred Rain. And it's for the woman that knows that this is the journey for her, the one where she just is.
Love that. Well, I'll put everything in the show notes for anyone who's listening, wants to connect with you in those platforms. Thank you again, Melissa, for sharing everything you did. I
Yes.
genuinely enjoyed this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you so, so much. And thank you so much for providing this space. And I can't wait to have you in my podcast
I would love that.
soon. Yes,
Absolutely.
there's a season 4 coming. So I can't
Yeah,
wait to have you and we'll talk about that. I love this
absolutely.
conversation so much. So thank you so, so much for just having me in your platform.
You're very welcome. And thank you again. And again, for everyone listening, please subscribe to the channel, share it. And especially if you found this valuable, give this gift to somebody else who can take these messages and move it forward in their life. So thank you again, Melissa.
Yay. Thank you so much, Kelly.